Diane, welcome to the Vermillion Unplugged. How are you doing today?
Good. Thank you.
Sweet. I'm so excited. And if people are watching this, so you invited me to your house. Beautiful house too, even though I kind of got lost right here. But it's
You found your way.
yeah, I found my way. I didn't want to step on the paint, and I was like, man, I hope I'm at the right address too. But it was great. It's great. But let's get into this. So first of all, what do you do, or what did you do before?
Well, I was the founder of Sharing the Dream in Guatemala. And so that's what I did in the past. Although I had a full-time job, I also worked in Sioux City at East High School as a school counselor. But Guatemala's always been my passion. We adopted Anna, our daughter, in 1985 from an orphanage in Guatemala. And one of the things we wanted to do is we wanted to adopt her from a place where we could have a connection. And so we chose Guatemala. We chose an orphanage so that we could have a connection for her, but also for us. And so we had, we were really connected to Casa Guatemala. My husband was the treasurer for a while. My niece, I had two nieces that were the treasurer. My sister was the treasurer. So my whole family got involved in this particular orphanage. And so it was really nice. We went down there quite a bit. My husband took groups down. I took groups down to just get people learning about the country, the people, and Casa Guatemala. So that's how it started in 1985. During the war, we went down during the war because there was a civil war in Guatemala from 1960 to 1996. And so the first few times we went down, there were guns all over. And it was kind of scary. But that didn't stop us. We just kept going. So it was interesting. It was interesting.
Oh, what was that war about?
It was a civil war.
Okay.
And it was really against the indigenous people. And so there's lots of people that I worked with after that were people who, their stories, just awful stories about the military coming through and just killing people in their villages. And so a lot of the people I ended up working with were women who had lost their husbands and sons through the military.
You know what also is when Myra came here, and I think people already know. So she's from Mexico, and what surprised us here. So when we came to the Midwest, there's a bunch of how do I say it, Native American culture, and then my wife would ask, or she would ask me, she was like, "Why here? Do they like embrace it?" I'm like, yeah, a lot of people are very proud of their Native heritage, and she says in Mexico and probably other like Central America, South America, if you're indigenous, it's actually kind of like a bad thing. And I do remember like one of the phrases people would say, either if you're in Mexico and you're very, very dark, one of the slurs is they'll say Indio, which just means Indian.
Mm-hmm.
And also Myra was saying that there's some, I don't know if they're Mayan, but there's some tribes over there, like they don't speak Spanish. They just speak their indigenous language.
Huh.
And there's a lot of discrimination against them. And then like the government does this and then this and that. So that's why she was surprised that here it's like the opposite. Like, whoa, if you're, people want to be native or they're proud to be native or indigenous. And over there, especially in like, it could be in the Latin countries, it's not like that.
Right. There's 23 different languages in Guatemala. And so it really splits up the country because you could go from one village to the next village and they don't speak the same language. So, the main language is Spanish, but there's, the groups that I've worked with through the years speak many different languages. And so it's quite different.
Mm-hmm.
So what we decided to do is continue to work with the orphanage. And so my husband was at the Luther Center here. And so he would take groups down and they would do different things at the orphanage. And the orphanage moved to the jungle, which was really interesting. And my husband was one of the people who, when it first started, he was down there with the director and a machete and clearing the jungle so that they could move to the jungle. They were in the city, but the director of the orphanage felt that the kids weren't able to run, to do fun things. And so she looked for a place for them to go. And it was a hard time because of the war. So they moved to the jungle. But when we first got Anna, she didn't know how to run. I mean, running was very difficult because she never ran. She was just in a house in a little community. So the orphanage then was moved to the Rio Dulce, and that's where it is now. And now it's a children's home because there aren't any more adoptions, but it's more like a school. So that's how we started. We started with Casa Guatemala. And that's been a real wonderful, wonderful experience.
What are the communities like? Because I think we mentioned it before, like there's real poverty there, right?
Right, especially like, all over Guatemala, but in the jungle, there's a lot of poverty. And what I saw, especially at the orphanage, were that people brought their kids to the orphanage not to be adopted. They bought them because they couldn't afford them. So they couldn't afford to feed them. They couldn't afford to take them have school. They couldn't afford clothes, and so they would bring them to the orphanage, and the orphanage would feed them and clothe them and educate them. And so there would be sibling groups, 4 or 5 from one family, because in the jungle they just couldn't afford them. And I since 1985 I have been in the jungle many, many times, and it's remarkable. Things change, but they don't change. The sickness doesn't, and so yeah. One of the things that Sharing the Dream has sponsored throughout the years is a health promoter at Casa Guatemala. And that's been really important because there isn't anybody there. And so the health promoter, what she does is takes care of the kids, but she also goes in the communities and helps with different things. So, it's, there's been some advancement. And one of the things that I'm really proud of that we did years ago and was I met a young woman who wanted to be a nurse. And we sponsored her so that she could become a nurse. So she went to nurses training. And now there's another big clinic down the river called Actenement. And she now runs the clinic.
Oh, that's cool.
So I'm really proud that, that we had helped her get her education, and that now she runs the clinic. And so, I just spoke to her the other day, actually. She FaceTimed me, and it was really fun. Her name is Maria, and she said, "Remember me?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, I remember you." So it was really fun to see her, see she's doing well, and she has a family and they're doing well. So that's always fun to see.
Have you seen the documentary this came out like years ago? It's called Living on a Dollar?
Yeah.
Yeah. So people, I like that documentary. So we talked about it. People remember when me and Myra were doing a podcast, we mentioned it a bit. So if people don't know, it's these I think it's like 4 college kids. They go to Guatemala, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to live how like most people live. So they live like $1 a day, but they don't just get $1 every day. So sometimes they'll vary. They'll pick out numbers out of a hat, but it's so they could realize, how it is to live there, especially because it's in a jungle, it's in a small village, how people live there. And it's amazing because I think a lot of people don't realize, I think we mentioned it too. People don't realize the poverty or how different countries are. Because like the only example I can give is like in Mexico, they don't have the same, what's the word? The same advantages as here. Over there, like poverty, of course, like here in the States or here, it could be South Dakota, anywhere. There's poverty. Yeah, you could be poverty. But over there, it's like real poverty. Like if you see like in those commercials or something, it could be like in Africa or India or any of the Latin countries when they're like in villages or bad houses. That's how it is. I remember my grandpa, my dad's dad, he lived, it was a brick house, very small. It's all concrete. I don't think there was like plumbing. You got to use like a bucket of water to flush everything down. That's it. That's how it is. I didn't have any issues with it, but that's how it is. Like they are poverty. They live like literally most people paycheck to paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
But
there aren't the safety nets. Here we have safety nets. So even the poor, there are some types of safety nets. There's nothing. there's nothing. Your kids are your social security. That's why you have 9 kids. You're
Exactly.
hoping that 5 survive and can help you. And sometimes they can't because they have kids and they can't take care of them. So the safety nets are not there like they are here. So poverty looks like a whole different thing there. But so we worked with Casa Guatemala for quite a while, and it did bother me that parents couldn't keep their kids. And so in 1995, one summer, I decided to go down there for a month by myself. I spoke very little Spanish. It was during the war. This wasn't the smartest thing I ever did, but I did it. But I decided I just needed to go and see if there's something I could do. And so I traveled around the country. The first week, I spent in a squatter settlement in Guatemala City, where my friend was. There was raw sewage coming down the middle of the road. It was very, very poor community. But my friend had established a sewing co-op called Upavim. And so I was very intrigued with that. But of course, they needed to be able to sell their products. So that was kind of the start. The second week, I went to Shela in the mountains. And I traveled around with an interpreter because I didn't speak that much Spanish. And I went to women's groups, just women's weaving groups. And what they all said is, if you would help us sell our product, we can feed and educate our children. So then the third week, I went up to Todos Santos, which is even further in the mountains, where they speak Mam. And I lived in a village, and I lived with a family in the mountains, in a cornfield. And that was a real realization. At night, we would sit around a fire in the hut and eat. And there was one chair and a little stool that they gave me. They sat on the ground. Usually, they would give me an egg, and they would have broth. So, and tortillas. But that was it. I mean, there was but they always wanted to give me the egg, which was really hard to take. But I did it. And then I came to the realization that, I don't know, what am I going to do? You can't have those types of experiences and not think about what can you do. And so I remember one night just saying a prayer and saying, what am I going to do? And so I don't know if it answered my prayers or what, but when I left Guatemala, I took a bag full of crafts because I'd been picking them up along the way, buying things from different groups that I'd seen. So I thought, well, maybe this is what I can do. I can buy some things and take it back and sell them to my friends. And so that's what I did. I had a bag. It was actually an army bag, a big army bag full of stuff that I schlocked around around Guatemala, and that was before cell phones and credit cards. And I mean, it was quite a deal. But I did that, and I filled my bag, and I came home, and I sold it to my friends and different people. And I thought, well, this is maybe something I can do. I can work with these women and do some things. And so that's kind of how it started. It was just with a bag full of stuff and, some different groups that I had worked with that I could buy from. And then I thought, well, my friends here in Vermillion were so helpful, and my family, particularly my family. And they said, well, let's do a nonprofit, and then we can bring more things up and, do some stuff. And so that's where we came up with the name Sharing the Dream. And the reason that we chose that name was because of Rigoberta Menchú, who was an indigenous woman in Guatemala, and quite well known. She has won the Peace Prize and all kinds of stuff. But what she said was, what I treasure most in life is being able to dream during my most difficult moments and complex situations. I have been able to dream of a more beautiful future. And that's where the name came from. Was just helping people fulfill their dreams of being able to educate their children. And so when I got back, we formed a nonprofit. Some people in Vermillion we formed a board. Mike Girlinghouse, who was one of our early supporters, he was a pastor here. I think he was the earliest president. Frank Slagle, who was a lawyer at the university, he helped and formed it and stuff. And so we formed it. And then all of the crafts, there were still groups going down. My husband was taking groups, and Mike was taking groups, and I was taking groups. And we brought the crafts back in bags, which is illegal and you shouldn't do. but we did it because at that point it was the only way we knew how. And so we brought crafts back. The crafts were in our basement here in totes. And I would get my friends to mark the stuff so that we could mark it up and sell it and send the money back. And the money mostly went back to Casa Guatemala, to the orphanage. And so we did that for quite a few years, where we would send it out to, I would contact people all over the U.S. that I knew, and I'd say, would you like to have a craft sale? And they would say, okay, we'll sell some Guatemalan crafts. And then I would put a box together. My family would. My husband would take it to the post office. And and that's how we started. And then eventually, it was just too much to hear. I mean, I had bins of stuff. We were starting to figure out how to get it mailed up, And so people in Vermillion said, let's have a store. Let's start a store. And I said, okay. But we really didn't. The first thing we did was Dick Sunday, who has an insurance agency. We moved our stuff from my house to his back room. He had a back room he let us use. We put up some stuff. And so we put stuff in his back room. And then what we did was every Monday night, because I was working full time, every Monday night we'd get together and would mark crafts. And so we'd mark stuff. My friends would come in. A lot of people would come in and would mark things. And then we would ship it out. Monday night was our big night to do stuff. And we did that for years and years. And then during the holidays, Dick was kind enough to always put the crafts out, and his staff would sell it for us. So that was really our first kind of store front, thanks to his kindness, And then eventually we moved across the street to where Main Attraction is now. It's a little building on the corner.
Yeah.
And it was a tattoo parlor before we moved in. And so we moved to that, and my friend Lana Sven and some other friends, I remember we set it up there. We just put tables out because we didn't know what we were doing. So we just put tables out. And then our friend Brian Walton, who he had his own computer business, he would sit there and he would do his stuff there, and then customers would come in and he'd sell it. And so that's how we would start, and that kind of grew, and it got bigger, and we had a lot of volunteers because we had to have volunteers. We had no paid help. And then Peggy Cooper, who was a volunteer for us, she said, this store is not working. We need to have a better store. So she went looking for one, and she found the one that they're at presently. And she said, come on, we need to move in here. And that's when that store became. But it was because of people like Peggy and Lana and Brian and Dick and all that. The people who, I had a dream, but it took a village. And so many people in Vermillion were that village.
How has with the impact you guys done with sharing with the dream, how has it affected the people in Guatemala or in the villages where you send the stuff to?
Well, it's been really interesting. What we did is, to begin with the profits, of course, we'd have to buy more crafts, but the profits, we would do things in the villages where we had bought the crafts. So we did some projects up in the mountains with a co-op. We did a pig project with another group where we bought pigs And then a family could get a pig, but then they could also learn what food they needed and how to take care of the pigs. So we did several pig projects. We did chicken projects like that in communities. We did water projects where there wasn't a water system, and we put in water systems. And we always did this with other nonprofits in Guatemala so that there was, somebody down there helping us. The churches, we've had really good response in Vermillion, like Dalesburg Lutheran is a church outside of Vermillion, and they wanted to do something, and they built a weaving center in a community way up in the mountains, and they gave us money and said, "Here, what can you do?" We said, "Let's build a weaving center," because these people were doing weaving outside in the rain, and some of them were doing foot loom weaving, and the foot looms were outside, and it just wasn't working. And so they built a weaving center, and a sewing center. They did too. And so the sewing center was really interesting because they would do the sewing, and we always want the women and the groups to progress, to be doing better. And eventually that sewing center started doing school uniforms for a school in the community. And so because of this sewing center that Dalesburg Lutheran built, they were able to have, build a business and do some things. And so, that was really, really neat. Trinity Lutheran here in town, there was a mudslide in 2005, terrible, terrible mudslide. And homes were just demolished. And Trinity Lutheran built 10 houses. They helped us do that. So it took a lot of people. I'll tell you a story about Trinity. When I was in Guatemala, a man that I knew said, "Diane, I want you to see this sewing group, this weaving group." So we went up to this weaving group. Oh my goodness. They looked so poor, so poor. It was women whose husbands had been killed in the war. And they were so sad looking and so poor. And he said, "I want to introduce you to a young girl. Her name is Isabel. She was in middle school." He said, "She is such a good weaver." But he said, in this village, they have no lights, and their floor is dirt. And so it's really hard for them to weave and keep the weavings clean and stuff. And he said, and Isabel goes to school, but she also comes home at night, and by candlelight she weaves way into the night. And he said, if you could find her a scholarship to go to school, then she could, she would be able to go to school. And so again, somebody in Vermillion, Vicky Fix, said, "I'll do that." She provided a scholarship for her for middle school, high school, and a couple years of college. And this young girl now works for Sharing the Dream. She's worked for Sharing the Dream for 20 years. She's the artisan development person. She has 3 young boys. She's married, has 3 children. She lives in Panachel. Her kids go to really good schools. She's worked her way out of poverty. She was a very, very shy girl. And now she's just wonderful. She's just brought her family out of poverty. She's got a job. Her husband has a job. Her kids are in school. And so it's really neat. But the other thing that happened up in that village was they were doing this certain weaving, and they weren't being able to sell it. And so I came back, and I asked Trinity Lutheran, "Could you use some altar cloths for the church?" "Well, yeah, they could use some new ones." And I said, "How about we have this group make the cloth, make the altar cloths?" And they said, "Sure, we'll do that." And so this group they made them for different colors of the church year, the green and the red. And so, anyhow, so the Trinity bought them, and they're still there. They're still using them. And anyhow, when I went back to this group, they looked so different. They were smiling. They were happy. They had a job. And so we have continued to work with them. And it's just so beautiful to see them. We also, because of their hard work, They got new flooring, they got new cement floors, new roofs, and they got electricity. And so that was one of the perks for them working so hard. So, yeah, it's been really fun to see what can be done to make life so much better.
Mm.
And it's through their hard work, So Isabel's a success story, but so is that group, that they're able to do well like that. So that's, that's fun. But there's just, so many things. There's a group we worked with in Chantelat. It's called Chantelat. And there was a Methodist pastor who wanted us to go there, Diego. He has a group called Ruth and Naomi, and he wanted us to go to Chantelat. So I went there. And these women, it was women in this little village, the bottom of this hill, and their husbands, during the war, a few years before this, the military came through. And they collected all the young men and the husbands and took them up to the Methodist church on the top of the hill and said, we're going to have a party and have a fiesta. And so, but what they did is they chained up the church and started it on fire. So all of these men and boys were killed. It was so tragic. Yeah, that's what happened. Also, the military then came through. This is kind of a horrible thing to say, but yeah, they killed babies. They used babies' heads for soccer balls. I mean, it was just atrocious, absolutely atrocious what they did in this village. And so these women were really disheartened and, So my friend Diego, who was the pastor, was also a tailor. And so he told the women, if you weave and the young boys who are left, I'll teach them to sew and we can make some things and you can have a livelihood. And so that's how the Ruth and Naomi started, is that the women wove and the young boys learned how to sew. So when I went down to this village, they had nothing. And so we ended up doing a chicken project with them too, so that they would have some kind of eggs and chicken and that kind of stuff. And so those were kind of the things that the different, I mean, it goes on and on and on. We've done so many things. We helped a nutrition center. There's just, scholarship students all over Guatemala. We started an elder center that's still going. And Lauren, if you interview, can tell you more about that now. But I started it out with a friend. I went there and she was giving the elders a bag of food a month. And so she said, could you help us give them a bag of food? I don't know, 15 elders. So I said, yeah, we could probably do that. And I asked our board and they said, sure, we could help with that. We'll get donations and do that. So we gave the elders bags of food. Well, pretty soon, my friend Shanita said, I think we should be feeding the elders, not just giving them bags of food, because sometimes that bag of food disappears. Somebody else takes it. So we found a little place we could rent, and then we had meals. So once a week, we'd have a meal for them. But what we found out is the elders would bring little plastic sacks, and they would take the food home with them because it was too much to eat, and they wanted to save it for other meals. And so then we thought, well, this isn't working as well as we thought. Then what we started to do is we started to say, okay, we'll prepare the food and we'll give it to them and they can take it home and they can have as many meals as they want to out of it. And so when I left 3 years ago from Sharing the Dream, we had 65 elders and they were being fed 3 times a week. And they would come to the Elder Center and get their food. There's different kinds of programs that we did for them. We worked with a hospital, and they got free medical care. The last 2 years, I have gone and interviewed them, and I'm doing a book on the elders. But I would go and interview them. They had terrible, awful stories, and took their photos and spent time with them. And so hopefully someday I'll get that book done. But one of the statements that really, and I think this will be the title of the book, that a man told me, he said, "We're not invisible anymore." So that kind of talks about elders. So that's been a big and I think ongoing project with Sharing the Dream.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of things, again, when you go to the store, you see all this beautiful stuff, but you don't realize the history and it's done, and how it's really made a difference in thousands of people's lives. Thousands. I see all kinds of people when I go down that it's changed their lives, and their kids. One of the things that, one of the stories that I really have enjoyed is, and I can't remember what year it was. I had a group of high school kids here in Vermillion, and they'd come and every Monday night, and they'd be doing stuff and helping me and all that kind of stuff. And they were so loud. I mean, it's high school girls, and they were so loud. But they would do good work. And so anyhow, they kept saying, when we graduate from high school, you're going to take us to Guatemala. And I thought, oh my gosh, they're so loud. I don't know if I want to do this. And they kept it up for 2 or 3 years. And finally they were graduating, and they said, okay, it's time to take us to Guatemala. And I said, okay. And I thought, I had a plan. I thought, I bet I could discourage them. And so that's when the Elder Center was going. And I said to them, okay, this is the deal. If you go down, we have these elders. If you go down, wash their feet, clip their toenails, and it's bad. It's ugly because they don't have shoes, and massage their feet, I will take you. And they said, bring it on. So I had a nurse come in. She showed them how to clip nails, the toenails, and what to do. And I took that group there, and they did it. And it was so much fun. The elders loved it. And these kids, everybody was crying. The kids were crying, the elders were crying. It's the first time they had the foot care clinic. And it was this young people from Vermillion that did it. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think there's many communities that would have embraced all of these projects, all of the things, the volunteers. Cal Peterson has been volunteering at the store for years and years and years. He's now 90 and he's still volunteering, and he loves it. So between the volunteers and the people who first started, and the people who've gone down, my friend Lana Sven, who we used to, she started going down with me way back at the beginning, and she then she got the PT people involved at the U, and now the PT people go down all the time. So yeah, so that's pretty neat. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so it's gotten into kind of a very nice community project. But I don't think people in the community realize, number one, that they're the ones that did it. The people in Vermillion really are the reason it's successful are the people in Vermillion. I could have had this vision, but if the people weren't there, or my family, my husband, my kids, my extended family, they all bought into it, and that's why it worked. So, yeah, that's one of the things is I really, really want to give the people in Vermillion the credit for being open-minded and not just saying, oh, those people are far away, we're not going to help them. What's the deal there? And they didn't do that. They embraced it. So,
no, it's amazing, like what you guys are doing. Oh, but one thing I do want to ask, let's say your first few times when you went to Guatemala, were you like surprised, or did you have like a culture shock, or is that what you were expecting when you went there? If you remember?
Well, I remember the first time I went there, what really surprised me were all the guns. I mean, when I was in Guatemala City, there were just military with just guns.
Oh, okay. Uh-huh.
And I said to my husband, I looked over, I said, those aren't loaded, are they? And he goes, they're loaded. Because I'd never seen that before. That was the biggest shock to begin with. And then I think culturally, I don't think there was, I think it was surprising, the poverty. And every place I went, it was just more and more and more poverty. That was hard. It was hard not to want to do everything and help everyone. Years ago, I was at Upavim, in the squatter settlement, and this lady who was actually mopping the floors came up to me, and she said, "Will you go and meet this family?" And I thought, okay, I'll go meet this family. And I thought, I've seen poverty. And so she took me down the street, and I went into this house, and this woman had 3 disabled children. They were like teenagers now. They were 3 young women who could not feed themselves, could not dress themselves. They were in diapers. They had some kind of genetic disorder that didn't appear until they were 5 years old. And then it appeared in each one of them. And now they were completely disabled. And they had a younger sister who was okay. And she helped the mother take care of them. But they had nothing. The father was there. He worked. He would buy the kids shoes, but they didn't. They had to have a special formula. They had to have special everything. And so I came back, and I thought, oh, we got to do something about that poor family. And I contacted a church in Casper, Wyoming. And I said, would you like to help this family? And they said, yes. So for years and years and years, they provided money for milk, for diapers, for everything. And since then, 2 of the girls have died, and the mother. And so there's one sister left. But yeah, the church said, yeah, we'll do this. And they did it. And so it's just a means of contacting people. People want to help. Mm-hmm. They want to do stuff. You just have to contact them and tell them the story, and they do it, So that's been really, really fun, is to see the people that are involved. The people who early on and still sell crafts all over the country. They're still sending boxes all over the United States, and people are selling stuff. So that's pretty interesting. All of the, hundreds and hundreds of people who've done that. So it's a big, it's done a lot, and it's a big organization. Mm-hmm. But I think that's why I appreciate doing this, is because I don't think, number one, people understand the history. I don't think they understand how much the Vermillion people have given to it, and done stuff, and donated time and money, and gone down. I've taken so many people from Vermillion to Guatemala. I think I've run out of people because I've just taken so many, and they've been so gracious, to do that. So it's been really a work of love.
Mm-hmm. What about when you go there? How's the food? That's one thing I always have to ask people when they go to different countries. Yeah, because I think people, and it's not their fault. Like, the misconception might be they think all like Hispanic people have the same food. Like, no, they're different. They're a little bit different.
Right.
I'm pretty sure like Guatemalan food is a little more different than that.
Guatemalan food. Oh, this is not a good thing to say, but it's more bland than Mexican. Mm-hmm. I think. It's not as spicy, and it's they have certain soups that are really good. They have certain things that are really good, but as a whole, it's not typical. It's not like Mexican food, so it's hard sometimes. When I've taken groups, though, we always eat at places that are, healthy and clean, and we have when we're at the Elder Center visiting, the folks at the Elder Center cook for us, and they're wonderful cooks. So I think people go down thinking, oh, I'm going to have to take a bunch of candy bars and stuff because but it's not true. But I have to tell you, at the beginning, when I first started taking people, it would have been probably good to have a few candy bars, because I would take them on buses, chicken buses. I mean, some of these poor people sleeping in hammocks. I mean, to begin with, it was an adventure.
Mhm.
It was a true adventure for these people. But then I got a little bit better. And I just thought, well, we could probably up it a little bit. And so I've kind of, I've upped it as far as, people going and stuff. It's now we're staying in, nicer places and eating better food and having bathrooms and, so it's a lot different. But those people at to begin with, and I never once heard a complaint. Now, they might have complained to someone else. They didn't complain to me, because if they did, I'd have told them to go home. So they probably knew that. But there's many people in Vermillion that have had great adventures. If you say, have you been to Guatemala? They'll roll their eyes and say, boy, have I been to Guatemala, But taking a trip with me early on was quite interesting.
And then one thing I just remembered it right now when you were telling me about it. I'm gonna say a month. It was during the summer. So my wife met a mom who's from Guatemala, and she has a daughter who I think is a few years younger than my daughter. I think she's like 5. I don't know how they met, but they met at the pool, and I think she just recently came to the U.S. But we were talking about like some of the differences between like Guatemala. So one of the things, because my wife likes talking about food, so she said, "Hey, what's the difference? Or is there like some differences?" So she said that over there, yeah, they don't eat a lot of spicy. Apparently, I think Mexico is the only one that eats a lot of spicy food down there. So that surprises. But one thing that I asked her too, I don't think I should say her name, but one thing I was asking her, like, what she did or how she came across here. So she said that where she worked. So she said she technically had one of the better jobs. She worked at a factory, and I think it was a sewing factory. I don't know where though. But she said, man, it was like she was working like 12 hours every day. I think
no bathroom breaks.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's those maquiladoras, and they're awful.
Yeah.
Awful. They treat people terrible. They work them hard. They don't pay very well. They don't get breaks. I mean, those are really bad deals.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why, for instance, Upavim, the sewing center in the squatter settlement, is so nice, because now the women are there. They're in charge of their own stuff. They set their pace. And anytime you have fair trade, which Sharing the Dream is fair trade, which means we're paying fairly, and not only paying fairly, but you're making sure that there's no child labor, that their people are treated humanely. And so that's one of the things, like Upavim, one of the groups that we work with, those women were working in that kind of situation. And now there's probably 60 women who are working there in really a wonderful situation. Mm-hmm. So, it doesn't take much to change things. It's just that you have to be able to do it. Now, Guatemala has a new president, president.
Uh-huh.
And so, and he comes from more of the labor, indigenous, that's how he got in. It'll be interesting to see how things change, because before this, it was military backed pretty well, and he's not. And so it'll be very interesting to see if things change some and where the money's going to go.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very excited about that, because that would be a pretty good change. And then I have a friend in this village where we have our elder center and a lot of stuff. There's a new mayor, and he's a friend of mine. And he's Chico, and I really like him. And he's making some changes in that community. And I'm really proud of him and what he's doing. He has been very helpful to Sharing the Dream. And so I'm very proud. He helped us get some land that we were going to build an elder center. And he was instrumental in doing that. So so I'm really excited. The last time I was down, I saw him. He was leading a funeral procession, and he came across and gave me a big hug, and it was fun to see him.
Is there any future plans you guys got for sharing the dream or anything else?
That is a Lauren question.
Okay.
Because I'm not part of the organization anymore. I'm doing some things.
Mm.
I'm writing the Elder Center book. I'm going to write the history. I didn't tell you, one of the things that we've done is we bought land for 2 rural schools. And there's so many things that we've done. It's hard to keep track. So we built, I saw these kids. Here's a picture, by the way. They were in a tent. That was their school. It was under a tent. And so Sharing the Dream bought land for that school, and they have since built a nice early school. The government wouldn't buy land, but they'd help them build.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second school, Chakaya, is a school that's very dear to my heart, very dear to my heart. We bought land for that school, and I've been connected to them for 20 years. I'm the godmother of the school, supposedly. That's what they're always telling me. And Sharing the Dream has helped them in a lot of ways. And so right now they have a reading program they're trying to do, so because the kids don't read for pleasure. They don't know how to do that. They don't even have enough books to read in their English or their Spanish class. They just don't have books. And so I'm really working at. They now have a teacher who's doing that, and so that's one of my own personal pushes. Is I'm doing that. So that'll be really fun, and I have this plan. I think I really, I always think I'm going to write all this stuff, but this school is so sweet, and they're out in the real school, and I would like to do, I think, have the kids write a book and write it on what it's like to live in, and then draw some pictures of what it's like to live in a rural community, what they eat, what they do. And so that's one of my far off plans, is to kind of maybe stay in that community and work on some of that with them. So that's apart from Sharing the Dream. That's just something that is in my dream that I might do.
Mm-hmm.
So because I love that little community so much.
Why is also, now that I'm thinking about it, why is Guatemala one of the more popular places to do like organizations, nonprofits? Because also like besides those like documentaries I mentioned, I remember doing a episode with Lindsay Jorgensen, who does the audiology stuff, and she told me about her trip to Guatemala too. Like they were helping out people that are hard of hearing, and I was just curious too. I'm like, it's always usually like Guatemala.
That's because I think probably Lana Sven at the university, who had the PT people. I'm sure Lindsay's probably gone through Lana's thing, because Lana there's PT that goes, OT that goes, there's groups, all kinds of groups but it started because Lana was working with us and going down, and then she worked at the university, and she's done wonderful things and taken all kinds of people down there. So in Vermillion, there's a huge contingent of university people that have gone down, and that's really the reason. But in Guatemala, there are a lot of NGOs. There's a lot of non-government organizations. I think the reason that I tried to have Sharing the Dream different is it's a relationship approach. It's an even relationship with the people there. It's not a one up, one down. So many times I have seen organizations down there, and they go down there, hand stuff out, give stuff away, do all this stuff. And I didn't believe in that. I thought, that's just not a way to treat people. You treat them equally. And so when I've taken groups or when I've done stuff, then they say, well, what are we going to do? We're not going to do anything. We're going to listen to people's stories. We're going to hear people. We're going to see about their lives. We're going to learn about them. But we're not going to go down and build, do stuff. Now, we have done stuff like after the flood, but when Trinity built those houses, they had people there building them. We didn't go down and build them. And so I think sometimes that's appropriate, but it's not appropriate all the time. people have to feel like they count,
Mhm.
and they have to feel like you're listening, and that you're equal, and if you start doing for people, that's not an equal relationship. And so that's one of the, I think, the huge philosophies that I tried to instill when I was the founder of Sharing the Dream, is to make it a relationship approach. And it's hard. Oh my goodness, it's hard, because there's so many organizations that go down and just give, and they don't ask the people, and you can see that. Like, I was in one village and somebody thought it was a really good idea to make solar ovens. We're going to go down and have solar ovens because there's sun and these people have these smoky things, and we're going to build solar ovens for them. Well, I went to that village like 2 years later, and all those solar ovens were now tables because the people didn't ask.
Uh-huh.
They didn't say to the people, how could we help you? What is it? It's like, oh, that's a good idea, solar oven. Isn't that a sweet thing? Well, they didn't want a solar oven.
Yeah.
There was other kinds of stoves they would have preferred, but they weren't asked. So I think it's really important. And it's hard for me to see mission groups, because people in Guatemala, there's a huge contingent of Catholics.
Yep.
Evangelicals, Protestants. I mean, everybody has their own, and the native religions. And I do not think it's my part to go down and evangelize, because what am I to? These people, my gosh, they know so much more than I do about hope, about living, and who am I to go down in this nice, comfortable house and go down and say, you need to accept Christ? It's like, they do. Why do I think that mine is better than what they have? And so I really have a problem with the whole mission stuff, because I think that's putting people down, and that's not an equal relationship. And I think we have to be very careful in how we work with people, and work with people, not for people. And what I try to do when I take groups is we talk about that, but then we bring it back here. What are there things we're doing here that we could do more relationship-based instead of a giving-based? How can we do more things? I'll just throw it out. Instead of always giving out Christmas packages or whatever, which is fine. I mean, that's okay. How about if we build something up where we're helping that family doing babysitting once in a while, so they can get out, so they can do something, or watching their kids, being a grandparent to their kids because they don't have any here, those kind of things where you're building a relationship with maybe one family instead of hauling out stuff. Stuff is only stuff, but a true relationship is altogether different. And that's really what I've tried to do. I have so many people in Guatemala that I love dearly, and it's because, it's taken me a long time, and it's taken a long time for them to trust me, some of them, because they think, oh, here's another white person coming down to give us stuff, and I've really tried not to do that, and I've tried Sharing the Dream not to do that. So it's a different philosophy than a lot of organizations.
No, I like that. I like the relationship, and I like how I'm remembering it with about this. Like, for example, if the women are like, if they know how to weave or sew, then why don't we, like you were saying, build something so they could do that and have a better environment, and they can make more, maybe some money on that, and it'll help out everyone. Stuff like that. Not just here we'll just donate this. That's kind of cool.
This group that I told you about in the mountains that Dalesburg built the sewing center for, and the weaving center, the first time I went down there and saw them, and they were so poor. I mean, so poor. They wanted to feed me, and they gave me a bean sandwich that I just about choked on. And none of them had bean sandwiches. They didn't have that, but that's what I got. And that was a real honor. So I ate it. But a lady came up to me, and she had a a baby in a pack and a small child. The small child's hair, he was malnourished, severely malnourished, and so was the baby, and so was the lady. And she had this ugly little thing she made. It was a little velvet purse, and it wasn't very good, and it was just ugly. And she wanted me to buy it, and I didn't. I didn't buy it. And instead, I thought, I just cannot do this, because what I'm showing her is you can make anything and I'll buy it. And that's not true. And so I sat down with her in the group. She was in the group. And I said, we'll really like to work with you, but we got to figure something out. You have to have pretty high grade stuff. So anyhow, I looked around and I thought, well, what am I going to do? They need money. How are we going to do this? And they can sew a little bit, but they're not great sewers. And so I saw a scrunchie that a girl had in her hair, one of those scrunchy fabric things. And I took it out and I said, how about, because they wanted to work with velvet and they wanted to do a little embroidering around it. How about you make velvet scrunchies and you can put little flowers around it, and we'll do velvet scrunchies. And I will order 200 velvet scrunchies. And this is what we'll pay. And they were so excited because they had an order. They were doing something. I think we had scrunchies for 10 years after that because there were so many scrunchies. But it gave them hope. They were so excited that they had something to do that they could do. And that's eventually the group that had started the sewing center. But after the scrunchies, we moved up to other things that they could do. But we started with just these little scrunchies. And so this lady with this child, she was going to have an income, and it wasn't just, please, I need this money. And it would have been easy to give it to her, but I didn't. I wanted the group to learn they had to have quality and they had to do it right. And then they made purses and bags and all kinds of stuff for us. And they all had income.
No, that's great. Man, you guys made a big impact now that all that stuff you guys told me. And I like how you said that, a lot of people don't know the history about it. It's really, I don't know how to describe it. I think it's amazing what you guys are doing.
Yeah, I think it is too. But again, I could have had all the dreams I wanted, but if it weren't for the people, I could, my family, and it was hard on my family. I had a full-time job, and at that time I had 4 kids. No, then we had 5, but, it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy. It cost us money, a lot of money, because there wasn't any, the organization wasn't paying me. It took time. I was going to Guatemala. I was doing stuff, and the kids had to mark stuff. My husband had to take stuff post office all the time. I mean, if you ask them about what they did as teenagers, they're going to say, marked crafts, and even some of my friends, I was talking to a friend the other day, and we were out at the lake in Yankton one time, and there was like 4 families, and we were just sitting around, and I said, well, since we're just sitting here, we might as well mark crafts. And I went to the car and I brought up boxes of stuff and little tags, and they sat, as we visited, they just marked. So, well, we might as well do something while we're sitting here. So, yeah. So it's been really fun.
That's funny. Now, because I'm looking at the time we got, before we run out of time, is there any last things or last words you want to give out?
I'll tell you a story.
Yeah.
Another story about one of the groups we worked with. Isabel, this gal that I told you that we, it was her family group, the one who got a scholarship and went to school. And they made the altar cloths for Trinity Lutheran. Anyhow, the Coleman Foundation, which is the Women's Cancer Foundation, asked me one time if I would have a group to make scarves. So a pink scarf for their deal. And I said, yeah, I think they could make some scarves. Well, how many do you need? I can't remember. I think it was like 500. I mean, it was a huge quantity of scarves. And so I asked the group, can you make, and it's hand woven. I mean, they're weaving these things by hand. Can you make these scarves? Oh, yeah, we think we can make these scarves. And I said, then you've got to make them on the deadline, on time. You got to do it right. And they said, we can do it. We can do it. And so I said, okay. And Isabel at that point was our artisan director, and she was working with the group. And they said, yeah, we can do it. We can do it. So they started making these scarves. And all of a sudden I'm getting these emails that say, oh, they don't have enough. They're not being done. It's really hard, And I kept saying, it's all or nothing. They have them all done on this date, or I'm not taking any of them. They've got to learn that they have to get them done. Okay, but it's really hard. I said, okay, just keep going. So anyhow, they got them done. They took them done on time. And the next time I went to visit with them, they were laughing so hard, and they said, oh, Diane, you wouldn't believe it. That last 50 was really hard. And they said at night, we would have these weavings set up, and as somebody was weaving, they'd fall asleep, would push them over, and the next person would start to weave, and they'd fall asleep, the next person. But they said, we got them done. And I said, look, you got them done, and you made a whole bunch of money because you did this on your own. And they said, yeah. But every time I see them, they laugh about those scarves because they said, we'd just push them over and the next one would come in. So there's so many wonderful stories, and, so many great things that have happened that it's a good legacy. It's really it's fun. It's just a fun thing to be able to have been a part of, and it's still going.
Mm-hmm.
I know the Elder Center is going strong. I love the elders. They're pretty special in my heart. And the scholarship students. So there's a lot going on still. And I think Lauren's probably going to do groups if anybody wants to go.
Mm-hmm.
So, it might be good to visit with her and have her on to tell what's going on now.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a continuation of, okay, that was up till 3 years ago. Now what's happening?
Okay.
Because I'm sure there's things I don't know about. And it's nice to kind of not be involved because I know way at the beginning when my husband and I were involved with the orphanage, and he was the treasurer, and they were short on money. It was like we would look around the house and say, what are we going to sell? Can we sell our canoe? Can we sell this? Can we sell that? So that they would have money. And it's so nice to be beyond that point,
mm-hmm.
Not to have to worry about the money. It's not my worry anymore.
No, that's good. That's good. Well, one day I'll make a trip to Guatemala now. I want to check it out.
Yeah.
I'll do that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think you would enjoy it. And all of these communities speak different languages.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was up in Todos Santos that week, they spoke Mom. I didn't speak a word of Mom. I hardly spoke Spanish. I'm not kidding. And we got along just fine. I mean, here I was in this little hut, and as I was sitting in that little hut, I thought, this is kind of like National Geographic. And then I thought, this is National Geographic. Here I am in this place in this hut. So, so I have had wonderful experiences,
mm-hmm.
That I wouldn't trade for anything. And that month I got home and I was healthy and fine. And, my kids were worried about me, and my husband said, oh, she'll be fine. She'll take care of herself. He knew me, but the kids were like, most mothers in middle age, most women in middle age, buy a convertible or, they do something silly. Not mine. She goes to a war-torn country and runs around for a month,
That's cool. That's cool.
So it was, and that was a start.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a plan. Somebody had a plan.
That's fantastic. I like that. But I need to end this now before we talk like another 3 hours. But no, I want to thank you so much for being on the show.
You're welcome, and it's been really fun to get to know you.
Sweet.
Even pre-show.
Sweet. Thanks, Diane.